sir, today?
Good. Thank you for being here very much. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're here to talk about a topic that is near and dear to really every founder's heart. The whole question of, I just ask that, like, how do you do it alone? No, you generally don't. Anna, congratulations. A lot of folks are out there struggling. I know Katie talked earlier, but it's very hard for folks to do it alone. And we're here to talk about those that are making the marriage work, as well as those that might be advising on how to make the marriage work. So we have a couple panelists here today. And as soon as we announced the topic for this, I was like, I gotta be the person to talk to these folks. I got great people that are lined up. We have Matt Bauer here from Barnum, partner at Barnum. We have Madeline, Eichen, and Charlie Childs coming from Intero Biosystems. I've met both of them, both sets of people, from interactions both with prior startups that I started with Honeydone, which failed because of, in large part because of founder matchmaking. So Matt was our attorney, and I'm very grateful for his help and support in that. And then Madeline and Charlie we met through Point Angels after they pitched, and when I met them, I was like, this is a rock star team. They are making the marriage work, it seems. So I want to hear what's the deal? How's it working? So to start with, Matt, I do want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and bring you here.
Yeah, I'm Matt Bauer. I'm an attorney with the Barnum Law Firm. I run our Ann Arbor office. I co-lead our emerging companies practice group, and I'm what you call a startup lawyer. Managed to make a practice out of representing companies with no money. And it's turned out all right. So, as I said earlier today, it's better than bankruptcy.
That's a hard act to follow. Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm Madeline. And we're co-founders. I'm CEO and she's COO of Intero Biosystems. We're a spin-out from the University of Michigan. We make miniature human organs for preclinical testing. So instead of killing animals and testing your drugs on animals, you can test them on our organs, see if your drug's going to work in humans. And we're very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So you guys, I think feedback, can you hear me right? Yeah. Okay, great. So when we talk about the marriage side of it, I promised you that I was going to really ham up that theme of the marriage. In many cases, the marriage isn't necessarily, you don't think of the attorney, the prenup side of it. It is very necessary, and I'm glad to hear. So really break out the relationship into three kind of phases, and that's kind of how I want the panel to go today, which is the dating phase, the getting married, and the honeymoon phase, and then probably shifting down into the long term of, okay, let's get the nuts and bolts, and who's doing the dishes at the end of the night. So to start with the dating phase, Charlie, I want to start with you and look at the initial vetting. Like, how did you go about, and you said, okay, this person, like, what was that relationship like as you built it, working through, starting a company?
Yeah, totally. So me and Madeline were in the same thesis lab at the University of Michigan. She was co-advised by another advisor, so I actually didn't see her that much. But we did work together a fair amount. So we worked on multiple manuscripts together. We were first authors on a review paper that we wrote together, and we just worked together very well. And it also so happened that we got along and hung out and we're friends. So that was extremely helpful getting to know her. When we realized we had a commercializable product, I'm a cell biologist by training. I'm not an engineer. I realized very quickly that I had a very, very big hole in the engineering and tissue engineering side of the space. And I was thinking through, I could have found this company alone, but that's very hard. And I have this big gap of knowledge that I really need someone to complement me. And the first person that came to mind was Madeline. And Madeline worked at a cell-based startup prior to graduate school. She's a fabulous engineer, a fabulous person to work with, and knew exactly how to run a startup, which is something I had never had a real job before. I have no idea how to do that. So we'd been dating this whole time in grad school. It seemed to be going well, so then I asked her to be my co-founder, and now we're here.
So that's a runway of a long time to go through. And grad school is not a short experience.
It's not.
No. So I'm curious, Madeline, when you were working with Charlie on this, at what point did you decide, I think we should probably become more than friends?
Yeah, so Charlie had been doing a lot of the work, going out and talking to customers and really seeing if the idea and this technology that she developed during her PhD really had commercial potential and really had legs. And she talked to me as part of this big set of customer interviews. And I was like, oh, well, you've got to be thinking about this quality thing and this regulatory thing, and you should really think about this manufacturing thing. And then I was, at the end of that conversation, I was like, I actually think maybe I know things that Charlie doesn't know. And Charlie knows things that I don't know because she invented this amazing product. And so we just had like quite a few like conversations, kind of feeling each other out and like seeing what the vibe was. And then, yeah, we like made it official. I think we incorporated the company. But yeah, I mean, I think it was like not something that I had gone into grad school necessarily intending to do. I loved working at a startup and I knew I liked that space. And so just kind of like having some time to percolate and marinate on the idea, it just became like more real and more exciting as time went on.
So you've got these not overlapping and overlapping skills involved there, and you kind of truncated, I feel like, a lot of the dating part of it. You're like, hey, we should start a company together, and I got Matt over here sweating a little bit. Feels like that happened fast with us in conversations. What do you think, at what point in the dating process do you guys start talking terms?
Yeah, early. So I'm going to mix metaphors on you here, but it was Robert Frost who said, good fences make good neighbors.
Sure.
And so the first property lines that you have to draw as founders is, what is that equity split going to look like? I had a client that I was working with, they had set up their own company through Stripe Atlas or something like that, and they came to me because they'd gotten into Techstars and they were 50-50 founders. And Techstars said, we don't take 50-50 founders. And this is a great data point because Techstars takes hundreds of companies a year, perhaps thousands across the world. And they had recognized out of their data, we don't want these 50-50 founders because it causes these lockups. So you've got to come up with an equity split. And sometimes that could be 51-49, but rarely, it probably really shouldn't be 50-50 because you will be in a deadlock if you get in trouble with your founder.
Now, do you have recommendations? Are you usually part of that conversation with a lot of startups, or is it they come to you after there's a problem?
Yeah, it's usually they come to me after it's a problem. It's more witchcraft than science as to how you figure out what those splits are. I think there's something that kind of sort of hits you in the gut. I will say though that a common problem is, a founder bringing on a co-founder. They have the conversation around equity. Maybe they agree to like a 60-40 split, and the 60 founder realizes that was probably too much equity. And so it's very hard to take something away once you've given it, so that conversation is very difficult. And I think people just have like a, overdeveloped sense of entitlement, so once you, kind of like my kids, so once you have that equity to have that conversation to say, look, I want you part of the team, but you're probably 20%, not 40%. But you got to have that conversation, you got to have it early. But the other way that you do that is that, and this is really the other kind of drawing the lines, is you've got to have what we call reverse vesting in place for your equity. When investors give you money, you give them equity in exchange for their cash, right? If they don't come up with all the cash, they don't get all the equity, right? And it's the same thing with founders. They're maybe not putting in cash, but they're putting in time. And if you don't get the time, if you're not getting the value of that time, you've got to readjust those. And so the vesting schedules do allow for that.
So, Madeline and Charlie, you don't have to share your splits and everything, but how did you guys manage the awkward conversations around vesting, or both equity and vesting? Like, how did those conversations go?
Yeah, so there's a third co-founder, our thesis advisor from Michigan, so there was no opportunity to have a 50-50 split. I will admit that we were very naive to everything, and we likely would have done a 50-50 split, so it's good that we didn't have that option. So the way we really handled it was Madeline is 2 years behind me in graduate school, so I spent a little bit longer on the company and inventing the technology, so we just then broke it out that way. So me and Madeline are full-time in the company. Our other co-founder is not full-time in the company, so he receives less equity than us, and we're both moving forward with the company. He'll remain at the University of Michigan, so that made the equity split a little bit clearer. How we then figured out the numbers, I think we've learned a lot since we did the numbers, and our next startup will be a lot more straightforward on how we do that. Is there anything to add?
Yeah, I think what's hard about equity splits is that it's all about future contributions to the company rather than being able to look at past data and deciding equity splits on that. And I think that's something that as scientists we've struggled with a lot, of like imagining what the future could be and making decisions based off of that without any real data. And so Yeah, I think it's a critical conversation, and it's hard to imagine at the very beginning stages of the company what that will look like. But yeah, more conversations about it probably would have been helpful when we decided on our equity splits.
So I'm wondering, as you're working through keeping up with the marriage metaphor, you got trust, you got disagreement that happens within a marriage. A lot of times there's couples therapist you might go to. Is there something along those lines that you found as a resource to help you have those conversations?
Yeah, so Charlie and I don't really argue that much. So we talk about things. Before we came, we disagree with each other every day. But we don't fight ever. We've never had a fight that would be like, this is existential for the future of the company. We fundamentally disagree about the way that we should move forward. However, we have a lot of small disagreements every day about small decisions that we should make about the direction that the ship of the company is turning. And I think that comes down to us being friends before the company, us already kind of knowing each other's working styles, and us also being really aligned on the direction that the company should be going. We have a lot of conversations about what does an exit look for us? What does the next thing happen with the company? And so as long as we're aligned on that, then the disagreements of the day-to-day don't take us off track, because we know we're both operating in good faith for the best outcome for Intero. So we do not have a marriage counselor.
So curious, Matt, on your side, when it comes to control and decision-making process, it's not always just about the equity piece. How have you seen founders perhaps divvy up control on certain decisions, and how would you advise maybe people that might be looking for co-founders set up control on certain decisions?
Yeah, control is, people do think it's equity. It can be at an early stage, but control is largely governed by contract, right? And how you're setting up your governance. So, if there's one co-founder who is taking up the majority of the cap table, they may be the sole board member, in which case they are really kind of making the sole decisions regarding management and direction of the company. If you have co-founders who are maybe even 50-50, they're 50-50 on the board, that's probably not a very healthy position to be in. So if that is your situation, you probably need some other outside mechanism in order to make sure that you're resolving any kind of disputes that are maybe existential. It's that, not just the arguments, but when somebody's throwing over the coffee table and if they've come to me, it's more like they're heading for divorce.
Are there, for a lot of startup founders, they don't necessarily have funds to go out and employ every single decision around the legal framework. Are there resources that folks should make, or that you want to make available as far as, hey, we've got these templates to follow, there's co-founder agreements in the same way when you're making an investment, there's safes, and there's this common safe that everyone uses. Is there anything that you see, like job descriptions, equity splits, that kind of thing that people should look at?
Yeah, you should have conversations about what your roles are going to be, who's going to do what the division of labor is, who is, putting the kids to bed and taking out the garbage, to extend our, short chart. You definitely need to have those. You need to have conversations regarding, what expectations are for compensation, right? When you are able to make money and start paying yourselves. You want to put as much of the cash back into the business as you can in order to grow shareholder value, because that's where you're really going to get a return on this investment that you are making of your time. So, keeping salary something where you're not under financial distress, but you are, you're making sure you're putting as much money back into the business as you can. Those are all really important conversations. Those are really outside of the legal framework, right? It's conversations that they need to have. If you have to go to your bylaws to kind of figure out what your rights are, as a co-founder, it's the writing's on the wall. Things are probably not going to be very well.
Do you have any examples, maybe of companies that you've seen that have not had that split, and even if it's not a legal framework, where it's really falling apart?
Usually it's not around. Usually it's more to do with competency and value, right? Whether or not someone on the cap table is again sort of earning this equity. It's the future projection of well, we thought you were capable of this, that this is, this much equity is what we assumed based on what we needed, and we're not getting that, and so we need to make an adjustment. So you do need sort of vesting schedules in order to have that as leverage to have that conversation in order to adjust that equity.
Back over to Charlie. So, keep going again with the marriage theme here. Every once in a while, a startup gets themselves in a spot where like, we got this really cool product. I think it's time to invite somebody else into the marriage. And they go out and decide to raise money. What went into that decision? Why did you guys decide to raise? Why did you invite other folks into it? And how did you kind of have that conversation?
Yeah, so we were convinced that we were never going to have to raise any money because we are really good at getting government grants. This was December of last year. That came crashing down. We had a very big customer approach us. They wanted our product. We didn't have a lab space. We didn't have any employees. We were like, oh crap. This is great. We'll have a government grant coming in. Government grant did not come in. And we were like, okay, we need to do something about this. Like, we need to meet this customer. This is like a huge pharmaceutical company. If we get revenue from them, like, this is made. So we started going to a lot of the local events, like on demo day, and talking. Luckily, like University of Michigan has a lot of resources for spin-out companies, so we were talking to our tech transfer office, and we realized pretty quickly that we needed to raise some money in order to deliver on this product to this customer, and it just kind of spiraled from there. And I think that was another big time that we disagreed daily, because both, like, every day we went back and forth.
Spiraling in a relationship.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
Madeline, what are your thoughts on it? Like, as you're getting all this interest in customers and...
Yeah, I mean, I think this time last year we were realizing, like, this business can actually go somewhere. We can raise money and we can have customer interest, and like, we need to go way faster than we thought that we needed to go, and the best way to do that is to raise money. And so it took us a while to figure out what we were doing, but we eventually did. I don't know.
I mean, what does it mean to go out and figure out what you're doing? Is it
like we were like, what's it? The people were like, can we see your data room? And we were like, what's a data room? we like knew the science and we knew the story that we wanted to tell, but we didn't have like all the other bits and pieces that you need to officially raise money. And so it was a big learning experience and like really challenging for both of us to learn this like whole new world and all these new words that we never heard before. And and then there was also this like big question of like, do we want to take a bigger check and then have another addition to the board and like have people in this much more formalized role in the company? And so that was a lot of conversations back and forth about one, like what was possible for us to do, and then two, what would be the best choice for our ability to run the company as well.
Matt, I want to talk to you about planning for divorce.
Yeah.
What does that mean for startups? Like, why is it appropriate to think about what happens?
Yeah, you should break up with your co-founder, much like breaking up with an ex. Make it quick and make it final. So assuming that you are in the the pole position on the cap table, and you've made this decision, like, this is not working out and I need to find somebody else, talk to the lawyer, let them know what's about to happen, get the paperwork ready, sit down, have the conversation, and say, we're buying back your equity, right? They may have some equity still vested at that point, and if they do, they did earn that, they get to keep that, they get to stay on the cap table, but you need that equity back because you're probably going to need to find somebody else, and so you're going to need that powder dry in order to hire either another co-founder or put it into the option plan so that you can build out the team through employees and contractors. So that's the way to do it. Be honest about what the situation is.
So this goes back to that importance of reverse vesting. Hey, you're going to get this many shares over 4 years, be part after a year, how much you have vested.
Yeah, and when it comes to reverse vesting, I am a big fan of what they call the 1-year cliff period, which is if they leave or if you decide this isn't working within 1 year, you get nothing, right? And you could say, well, that's harsh. Maybe I put in 9 months. It doesn't take 9 months to figure out if this isn't working. It usually takes 3 months, much like other relationships. And so and you know, you could say it's harsh, but at the same time, it's like everyone's making an investment in this, right? You're investing time, and your investment didn't pay off. I'm sorry about that, but we're going to need to move on because we need your equity back from somebody else.
Are there times when we're talking about bringing in the extramarital partners into this, where not having those agreements in place and not having the appropriate reverse vesting set up causes friction within the deal, or you try to bring on investors?
Yeah, there's, most investors, if they're going to do even light due diligence in your data room, they're going to make sure that you have reverse vesting schedules in place. They're going to make sure that your corporate house is in order. The other really important part is they want to make sure that you have good title to your IP, whether that's a license from the university, that you have proprietary information mention assignment agreements in place, and anyone you're working with is under a contract. So those are really the pillars to making sure that you have a good foundation to invest in. And this is the other place where I do see a lot of problems, is sometimes there are like promises of equity, but it hasn't been documented. Well, we can't afford the lawyer to draw this up, so we've got this piece of paper that says you're going to own 20% of the company, and we'll get that to you eventually. And then it doesn't work out. The paperwork is not there. The vesting schedule is not there. It's just a promise on a piece of paper. And I talked about, having that hard conversation to say, this isn't working out, we're going to need your equity back. Well, when you've got a promise there, but you have no mechanism of pulling it back, then you're stuck. And then you got the person who does think, no, I deserve all this 20%, and that can sink companies. So it's very important that if you're going to promise equity to someone, that you're going to deliver on that promise and put it together in the proper structure.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And unwinding something that's well documented is a lot easier than something that's kind of loose on that side. So I've spent a lot of time talking on contracts and a lot of the negative things that can come up. What about the fun things from the marriage itself? So what are the things that you guys do to keep the relationship alive? This is not starting a company is not. It's not. Who cares?
Yeah, we always joke like our husbands want to kill us because like I think Madeline's like the last person I texted. We're in constant conversation all the time. We still hang out as friends. I don't think you need to be best friends with your co-founder. In fact, I think it actually might be better if you aren't, because you can have more real conversations without any emotions in it. But I'm very thankful for you to be my friend still. We like to watch RuPaul Drag Race. Anybody else likes to watch RuPaul Drag Race? Great, that's a great show. We also what we're really excited about is that we get to make all the decisions, and that includes making the culture for our company. So we just hired 2 full-time employees. We're starting to build our team. We get to pick the fun things that we're all going to do together, or how we want to talk to each other and how we want to treat each other. And I found that really fun and rewarding, getting to talk through all of that with you and figuring out how we want to be leaders and how we're going to lead our company through that. And the reality TV is great too.
Yeah, Charlie and I have also traveled a lot in the past years. We've tried to wrap up this fundraising round, and so we've shared a lot of hotel rooms together. And no, and it's just been this really exciting time for both of us. I'm really grateful for the experiences that we've been able to have because of Intero and the things we've gotten to do that I had never imagined for my life. It's just really nice to have someone to talk through the questions that you have that come up day to day, that to talk through some of the big decisions, to give you a gut check on decisions that you are going to make. And so I can't imagine not doing this with a co-founder, because it's so valuable to have someone that you trust so much, that has a different skill set than you and a slightly different perspective than you, but ultimately wants the same things. That's been really valuable and made this experience much more fun.
I will also say one of the hardest things we went through was the fundraise. We had an oversubscribed $2 million pre-seed round. It was great, thank you, but it was probably the hardest 6 months of our life. And people say some crazy things to you when you're fundraising. And it was so wonderful to have another person to be like, did he really just say that to us? Did I read that totally wrong? If you were just sitting there by yourself, I would have gone crazy.
So what I would say on the single co-founder side, to your point, it's a lot. All of the single co-founders that are out there, it is very difficult. And not impossible, certainly not, but there are other co-founders that are building up their startup ideas, their thing that they're passionate about, and they're going through a lot of the same, very similar things that you're going through. So I love MFF and Founders First Fridays that they hold. I love all the things that we're doing within the community, especially I think we improved here today, I'm not sure soon, but there's a lot of great founder support and a focus, especially in the Midwest, around founder support that I hope you realize that you're not in this alone, even if you're not, having found your marriage at this point. So with that, I would thank you all for being here. Thank you all for listening. It's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe we should quickly ask the audience, is here anybody who has a question that absolutely needs to be asked?
Okay, please.
It's not asked.
Or not.
I don't think about it. Thank you all for the panel, great stuff on stuff. But to that last point from Luke, I feel like there's a lot of discourse lately on kind of against solo founders and this push towards a co-founder. And typically, I think in the vein of looking for people with diverse skill sets. I think you guys, from my understanding, come from a similar background. So how did you guys navigate that in these last 6 months of trying to fundraise and with investors and saying crazy stuff? So what was that like?
Yeah, the first thing I'll say is I don't think you need a co-founder. I think it just is way easier. I can imagine doing this without Madeline, but there are people way stronger and smarter than I who can do it. And I think everybody ragging on single founders is crap. And just be they can do it, it's fine. But that being said, me and Madeline are perfect complements to each other. We have different skill sets. We came from the same background, but in our personal lives, we are very interested in different things. We have different perspectives on things. And I think at first, especially in the fundraise, it really helped us understand when we had these disagreements day to day, we're both very stubborn and headstrong. And I actually think that really helps us because now both of us have to realize both of us can't be right all the time. We have to concede at some point. It's made us both really understand I have learned so much from Madeline, thinking from a different perspective that I never have before. And I hope you would say the same about me. So it was really hard, but it made our communication really strong. And by having a common enemy, that's a very strong word for what I'm saying, and the challenge that we're facing, I think that also really helped dial in our skills.
Yes, I agree. And I do think also in our fundraise, we really tried to highlight the ways that we were different. So it helped that we were from the same, we learned how to think about science in the same way because we were in the same lab. But because I had different experience prior to grad school, my focus was slightly different. We were able to kind of highlight the ways that we strengthened each other. And that's also to say, we have now brought on someone who has a completely different skill set than us, who has really strengthened the team. And so to that point about solo founders, I think by intentionally building out the right team, you can do everything without another co-founder necessarily.
Thank you guys.
There was one more question.
Yeah, for Mr. Bauer, what have you found is the optimal number of founders for
Well, when it comes to the solo founder, I think the other challenge there would be potentially fundraising, right? I think for investors, they see that as risky because if something happens to the solo founder, what happens to the enterprise, right? So the more people you have on the cap table who are involved in the business, the more likely it is to succeed if one of those pillars sort of, is not able to, proceed with the enterprise. So, I think 2+ is good. I think more than 4 is probably too many, right? That you've got that many people on the cap table, there probably are some folks on that cap table, maybe if you're up to 5 or 6, are there some people on that cap table that maybe aren't founder level that really ought to be coming out of the option pool as opposed to getting a founder title on the cap table?
Something I want to pass on that I heard in 1977, I think it was, at a seminar at U of M about how to start a high-tech company. And one of the things the guy just emphasized about what you were doing is he used the term know thy parachute. Know when to pull the ripcord, know how to do it, know what it implied. covers a lot of what all of you were talking about, but things you were talking about is a lot more formal about doing it, but you gotta consider, when you pull the ripcord and say this isn't working, completely or partially, did you consider that?
What's a parachute?
In other words, bail out.
I know what it is.
Get out.
Okay.
Parachute, okay. Could be taken into place.
This is for Mr. Bowers. Have you ever had any co-founders that are like married? I know like it's sort of. I literally married because I work in a business where me and my partner were separately working on a business and then we started dating. We're not like opening a startup or anything like that, but I know I heard there's a stigma around married couples, of course, going to fundraising and stuff like that. And it can make it more stressful, you know, you come home from work, you're like, okay, and then you're like, ugh, and then it's just like a normal marriage.
Yeah.
Or you double that stress sometimes.
I think the only thing that's scarier than a solo co-founder is co-founders who are married. I have heard a lot of investors say we don't invest in couple co-founders. That is a thing. And I think that's maybe one of those things where you got burned on it once, and then, you know, investors are like an old ladies knitting circle where they're always telling ghost stories about bad investments, and so the married co-founder thing is real.
I just want to jump in real quickly. Junior Gaspard, I'm with Fulcrum Equity out of Atlanta. We invest in companies when they get to like $1 million in revenue, and we invest 10 to 20 million. Matt is spot on. We're B2B SaaS. And it is, we've invested, one of our most successful investments is a dad and a son, and that required a ton of conversation, but married couples, really, really difficult. So, Matt, you're spot on.
Well, because it's, like we talked about, it's hard enough when you have co-founders who are friends who maybe have to have that tough conversation. If it's, you know, you need to have that conversation with your husband, baby, this isn't working out. Definitely add the dismissive baby before you make that statement. It always helps. That makes it 10 times harder.
And then there's also a lot of eggs in that basket, right?
Yeah.
Putting our financial livelihood together into this baby we're making.
Yeah.
A lot of other things involved.
I was just going to add real quickly, the other point Matt made about making sure you keep enough equity. Like we see a lot of times cap tables where it's like, who's this person? What do they do? And they own 30% of the company, 40% of the company. It gets really hard when future investors come to the table and there's no equity there. So I just wanted to reinforce that.
Thank you. The very
Go ahead.
Wait.
All right, I'll ask.
All right.
So if you have an 83B signed, right, that's for your spouse. Let's say that spouse is no longer your spouse. Does your next spouse also have to sign an 83B, or is that?
I need to get you an engagement letter. This is an awfully specific question.
What's going on back there, huh?
Well, I mean, you were talking about marriage. I wouldn't have thought of it unless you were putting it in the context of marriage.
That's Luke's fault, not mine.
We can take that offline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they just keep it, and then the next person gets one?
I assume you need a good divorce attorney and.
If there are 2+1 or 2+2 founders are there, or how to split the equity the best way? Like, this is a very different question because somebody have developed the technology, design it, somebody is executing, and somebody is marketing. So how these things should be split, equity should be split between the 3 partners, 4 partners?
It's really hard. You know, you've got to do the hard work of thinking about, like, if all 3 of us are here and we put in 4 to 5 years worth of work and we put in the full amount of the value that we think we're able to, you know, bring to bear, what does that look like on the cap table? Keep in mind too that if you are successful in raising money and you go through multiple rounds of raising money, you could be in the single digits on your cap table by the end, right? So that single digits going to be worth a lot of money, but you know, so like I said before, it's more sort of witchcraft than science. It's, you know, what feels right. You know, there are like these there was like this like online app that you could like fill in and say like, well, I'm the engineer and I came up with the idea and that was worth something. It's worth nothing, by the way. But you know, maybe that's like a useful way of kind of like, let's just, you know, start checking this against our gut. Yeah.
One thing that we've learned is like full-time founders, and again, we're working with 3, so take this with a grain of salt, should be like, again, those numbers, over 30%. And what we did not appreciate when we did our initial equity split is like, if you're not a full-time founder, especially if you're like an academic founder who's never going to take a job somewhere else, because why would you? You should be like under 10, closer to 5. And that can be like a really hard conversation to have, because a lot of times those people, like, it's their baby, they invented the technology, but like they're never going to work full-time at the company, so why should they receive its future? It's not a past. Like, why should they receive the same amount of equity as you when you're taking on more of the risk and working more for the company?
So that's part of the tech commercialization part where, okay, we've developed this technology, now the work actually starts.
Right, now it
Part
now
of
is-
building it, marketing it, producing it, securing the lab space, getting the investors, that's a whole beast of a conversation, so. Yeah, all right, maybe next year.
Please.
Thank you everyone for being here.